As a filmmaker, one of the most important tools that I use is emotion. Now, especially as a wedding filmmaker, emotion is something I use to drive the pace and the narrative of my wedding films so that months and years later down the line, our couples can look back on them and feel like they're being brought right back to that very moment on their wedding day. One of the most important ways we do this is through coloring and stylizing our films. And while I love our digital sensors and our sharp lenses, sometimes I think that they can be just a little bit too perfect. I want to talk to you guys today about a tool I found that I think I'll be able to implement in 2025 to bring a little bit of character and emotion back into my wedding films. The tool we're going to talk about today is called DeHancer. Now, for transparency, DeHancer did provide me with a license in exchange for this review, but no money has exchanged hands and they have no say in my opinion or the final video before it goes live. That being said, let's check it out. So jumping right into Premiere, I already have a timeline set up for us with a couple clips from our most recent wedding. And essentially what we're gonna do is, this is my first time using the plugin. So I'm gonna run through it with you guys and we're gonna see how intuitive the UI is for a new user and what you can really accomplish with it. So for context, this is an M1 MacBook Air from mid-2020 with 16 gigs of RAM. So that should just give you a little bit of context on how it'll run on your machines. So you're gonna find DeHancer after you've installed it over in Video Effects, and then there will be a folder called Film Emulation with DeHancer being the only thing in the folder. So you're gonna go ahead and just drag and drop that right on your clip, and right out the gate, it looks like it's applying a default preset. So over here in your Effect Controls tab is where you're going to be doing all of the adjusting, and here are all of the options that you'll be able to use with this program. Now, I think for us personally, we're only going to be really focusing on the film grain, halation, and bloom. There's a lot of other options in this, but I'm gonna talk about those because those are the things I think we'll be using the most. So let's go ahead and just jump right into film. So this is enabled right now with Kodak Vision 3, a Super 8 film. And as you can see, there's a ton of film profiles in here. I mean, even Fujifilm Instax, which is the little instant Polaroids that you have. So I think it's really cool that they have all these options, but just checking these out, there's some I recognize, like Eterna, Cinestill, the Golds, and the Portras, as well as all of the Vision 3 stock. So I think I'm going to want to start by turning off everything that they have on. So let's go through individually and see what's on. All right, and essentially what we're gonna do is go ahead and just grade these 5 clips as if I was grading them for a wedding film. So here I'm gonna skip ahead just so we can see these bridesmaids' faces in order for getting some good skin tones. There we go, there's a good frame. And let's start off right here with input. So I think I could probably white balance this just a little bit better. It's a little leaning warm. So I'm gonna pull this down just a hair, just to get us kind of at a better starting point before we add on a film emulation. And I think I'm gonna wanna go with Eterna, just because Eterna has always been one of my favorite film stocks. And I did see it up here somewhere. There it is. And let's go ahead and enable that and see what it does. So it adds a lot of green and a lot of blue, but overall the image seems a little bit flatter, a little less digital. So we're going to go ahead and go back to our input tab and we're gonna kind of counteract a lot of that cold just to get this kind of to a similar spot as the rest of the footage we're gonna have in this film. I think that's looking pretty good. Again, this is what we're at now. This is where we started. So as you can see, kind of that film emulation killed some of the highlights up here. And I think we're off to a pretty good start. I think I can get a little bit less green, add a little more pink and orange in. And I think that's looking like a pretty good spot. So let's go ahead and collapse those 2 tabs. And now we're gonna skip over all of these because I don't think these are gonna be anything we're gonna use. So let's go ahead and check out this next tab, film grain. And in here, it looks like we have quite a few options of presets. ranging all the way from 8mm film all the way up to 65mm film, so almost IMAX. And I think we're gonna run right now with the 65 with ISO 50, and let's enable that and see what it does to our film. So super subtle, but as you can see primarily here in the whites, as soon as I enable that, we're getting a little bit of noise right there. And it looks great, especially over here on the back of the bride. If you look kind of at her arm and her glove on her dress, it adds kind of just a nice bit of texture in this fall off, because this was all shot at 1.2 as well. So I think the 1.2 paired with the 65mm film grain looks really great. Now that we have kind of a baseline that we like in terms of film simulation, and pop over to our next clip. So we're just going to go ahead and paste this. And as you can see, it does need a little bit of work just because we had different exposure, white balance, all that. But overall, I'm loving kind of like the softness of how this film looks. So I'm gonna stick here in input, and we're going to go ahead and just bring back a little bit more warmth. I think that looks great right there. And I think I'm going to pop over to Lumetri because I don't see any kind of option for exposure over in DeHancer besides the pushing and pulling. But I think since I'm familiar with Lumetri, let's see how they interact together. And I'm going to bring in just a half stop of light through the exposure tab. And honestly, that's looking pretty good. It does not look like they had any problem whatsoever going together on the FX tab. And maybe we can even cut our tints here as well. So I think that is looking great. So I think overall that went a lot quicker because we had that baseline film that we liked from the first clip. So I think something that DeHancer could maybe implement going forward is kind of a tab to kind of clear that default preset that they have on there as soon as you apply the effect, because going through each tab and turning off the effects I don't want to use took a while. Popping over to our next clip, we are in a different setting. This is during bridal prep, and let's just go ahead and start over from the beginning. We'll see how long that takes again. So as you can see, that took like 30 seconds to a minute, which does not seem like a lot, but with the amount of clips that we use in a film, it can add up quickly. So let's go ahead and start from base here. So we're gonna wanna go back and let's check out how a turn is gonna look on this. I'm liking the colors that we got from that, so let's turn that off, back on. Still leans a little bit more green-blue, but you're gonna get that out of the Turna. So let's add in a little bit of warmth and a little bit of pink to kind of counteract the green that that brought in. Now, I think that looks great, and let's turn that off. It definitely kind of flattens out and mellows out the colors like a lot. So I like how that looks. And let's pop down here to film grain. We're gonna go ahead and add on the 65. Let's do a higher ISO on this one so we can see if we can get a little coarser of a grain. Let's try the 500, see how that looks. So the 500 definitely brings in a lot more noise. I think for me, I would probably stick around the 6550 or 120. Let's try the 120 on this clip. I think that's looking good. And because we have some highlights on her ring, I want to go ahead and try and bring in some halation and see what that's going to do for us. So let's enable it at its default. So as you can see, it did bring a little bit of the halation and red kind of there in her ring. It's way too much. So again, I think we're going to be leaning towards the 35, 65. Let's try 65, 70, and turn this on and off and really see. Let's zoom in here and see if we can see up close what it's doing when we apply this halation. So this is going to be the item in this clip that I think will have the most halation. So let's see again at 8, and pretty much anything that is highlighty or over a certain white value, it looks like is going to get that halation applied to it. And I don't want that. I kind of want it primarily on the highlights of her ring. So let's see if we can do something like that. And here at 65, you can see it's super subtle. Right here around the rock, if I turn this off, that's gone. If I turn that back on, get a little bit of bloom almost on her ring, and I love how that looks. So let's go ahead and zoom this back out. And we're gonna go ahead into our next tab, which is bloom. And I think we'll get this bloom nice right here in this diffused window light that's coming in. So let's go ahead and just enable it with the default settings. Yeah, you could see it lightened up a little bit in her pajamas as well as the curtain. And the lower we go in millimeter, the more bloom we're gonna get. So I'm gonna actually, I think, go for 16 in this, because I like that it's a little bit subtle, but you can still see it. So in conclusion, I think DeHancer is a pretty solid plugin all around. I do think there's a couple things that can be fixed about it. For example, if it would apply as a blank slate effect, and I don't have to go through every single tab and close, disable everything I don't want on the clip, that would save a lot of time. But you can get around that just by copy and pasting after you have kind of a good setup that you like. I do think there's a lot of effects in it that I probably personally will never use, but I think some people out there will find enjoyment in those. And from the couple effects that we did use today, I loved the images that we produced. So I think it does hold a spot in my 2025 editing lineup. It probably won't be on every project, but definitely ones that lend themselves to a more nostalgic feel. If you're interested in picking up a copy of DeHancer for yourself, you can use the affiliate code in my description to support me, as well as the discount code on screen for 10% off your license. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys in the next one.